Hey darlings. Margarita Vladimirovna met Natalya in the corridor of a private clinic and, with her eyes down, said, "Natalya Leonidovna, come to my office urgently." Natalya looked at the time before the start of the working day. There were minutes left. Days ago she did not feel very well. First there was a slight dizziness, then nausea, and when after lunch she vomited without thinking, she went to the pharmacy and bought a test to be sure. In fact, as she expected, it showed 2 stripes, however, giving birth to 1. The second child was not part of his plans. It's been a year since he left his parents' house. He and his girlfriend rented an apartment, and recently they filed an application with the registry office. Although Natalya herself is not yet old, she gave birth to a son now she is, her husband will be this year. If she had a child, maybe she would have thought, well, what about a friend last year I gave birth and nothing happened? But I still decided not to tempt fate, and when I went to the gynecologist for tests, as a precaution, I had an ultrasound for something serious. While accompanying Margarita, I became very nervous, and my colleague's pensive look further ruined what was already not very good. Good mood, Natalya. Don't be upset. The doctor knows that there are different cases, but you need to do a repeat analysis. Margarita Vladimirovna tucked him under a medical cap, pulling out a lock of hair, looked away as if she didn't dare say something unpleasant out loud. Yes, don't delay. Say what's wrong with me. The thought of the most terrible disease in the world, cancer, crossed my mind, but I didn't say it out loud. So young. She can't even give her grandchildren a donut. The son has been so bad for years. She was offered a place in a private clinic. That's why she herself worked as a rheumatologist for many years in the state. Only her life began to shine with bright colors, and then an incomprehensible wound grabbed her. I repeat, calm down. The tests showed trichomoniasis, and you caught it sexually. So I want to repeat the test to check the son again. If the diagnosis is confirmed, something will be needed. So mess with your pregnancy. What does it mean to have sex with a lover I don't have and have never had? A son. Still without conjectures, Natalya muttered uncertainly and looked at the time again after minutes. The consultation should start now. She didn't even think about it, and I could have gotten infected in the bathhouse or in the gym. I shower there after training. Natasha. Margarita looked at her, as if she was explaining the capital letters. It would be good if your Alexey passed the tests, and Natalya wanted to scream at herself, already feeling her face flush with excitement. Natalya, I repeat. Once again, you need to do the test. If the diagnosis is confirmed, then you will think who knows well. Suddenly something got confused in the laboratory. Margarita tried to reassure, even though the diagnosis was confirmed. This is a non-fatal phrase. Trichomoniasis can be treated. The main thing is not to let it go. Well, who am I explaining it to? You yourself are a doctor, just thinking that you caught the disease through sexual intercourse. She got dizzy and started to feel sick again from shame. I wanted to cry as she looked into the eyes of the girls from the shame laboratory. Nightmare. Alexey, she is really infected. Even if he had a lover, he should have thought about protection first. Lord, what a pity. You fool. You should have been tested at another clinic. But what difference does this make when it comes to dark thoughts? Chubby will definitely be confirmed. You could go to the laboratory yourself and rush the girls. Well, then why hide your eyes in shame? I will definitely go crazy. A wedding coming up, and my parents didn't even want to think about it. Years of peaceful family life would simply fly away for the first time in my life. Natalya was in no hurry to return home. She sat in her office for a long time. Knowing her character, to be silent no is no yes, and why should she remain silent until she delves into the truth? Then tomorrow she will eat herself whole. She stopped on the way. I threw some nonsense into the basket until the store, then I sat in the car for a long time, not daring to go home, and only when it got dark I got out and, barely moving my legs, walked slowly home. Where were you? You were not answering your calls, Lyosha muttered with displeasure. I didn't want to start a difficult conversation, but I ended up being silent. Even more complicated. Yes, in fact, why should she be silent and put on a good face when the game is bad? Lyosha, I'm hanging up in the closet when I'm pregnant. Cup squeezed a raincoat because of this. She didn't want to talk to her husband at all. She didn't know that he would dissuade her from having an abortion. I always wanted a second child, but it didn't work out. When I saw the joy on his face, I raised my hand. But that's not the main thing. I was diagnosed with trichomoniasis. Is sexually transmitted. I took the test again today, and if the diagnosis is confirmed, Natalya looked up and looked closely at her husband's stunned face instantly. I realized I hit the nail on the head and continued. Me, and from here it follows that everyone will have to undergo treatment together. You can call your lover right now and tell her, and be sure to see a doctor like this. Things are not jokes. You don't want to tell me anything. What kind of nonsense, Natasha? This can't be, said Alexey hesitantly. Who is she? I'll slap you in the face, Natalya shouted. Alexey didn't answer anything with such tight turns. The brain started working offline. Scroll through all your life in your head. You need the son early. If I go to the clinic, it is recognized that I will have to raise all my friends. But you understand, I recognize the son and the son. Natalya is tired, sank into a chair, covered his face with his hands. Shame. Soon every second person will appear at the clinic. Finger her and feel sorry for Natasha. Please don't cry. I call myself whatever you want. Just don't leave me. I don't have love. Singing doesn't mean I can't digest it. I don't know how I did it. Then I was drunk both times. I understand that's not it. It's an excuse. But I want you to know everything I give you. That word will never be repeated again. I know it, without letting it. Finish, Lyosha interrupted silently, shaking his head. I couldn't have said that. But I knew that if he lied, new will only make things worse. Let me figure it out myself. I don't want you digging in this dirt, or Rava or I collecting things until we can. We will get a divorce, and we will not divide the property. I'm going to live with my son for a while. I'm out of time. You know, I'm going to put the whole city at risk. Find out the truth. There is no need to go to the children. It's Olga. What Olga? Frowning, Natalya began to sort everything out in her mind. Our son's future wife barely understood Alexey. In a second her entire life was already flashing before her eyes. Alexey closed his eyes in shame. Why did he get involved in this dirty game? Okay, the first time it was all spontaneous. He fought with his wife. It was without warning. Your son. The door opened. Olga, seeing her in short shorts, stood there for about 5 minutes looking at her legs from ear to ear. And when he saw the deep neckline of the jacket, he was completely speechless. Son was not at home. To get out of danger, he went to the kitchen and placed a bottle of wine on the table, and without further ado, she took out glasses, kindly offered to have a snack all night, flirted with him, complimented him, weighed in, moved the glasses to the sides and put 100, and instead of slapping him, Olga hugged him and kissed him back, only came to her senses. So, when everything happened, I had to apologize for a long time, asking that no one find out anything. At first I was worried. Well, then somehow everything was forgotten, until Olga herself came to their house to study. The son also went to a friend's wedding on D-Days, claiming that he didn't feel good about Kostya. She didn't go when Alexey saw her at the door. He wanted to send her home immediately, but Olga ended it. Being a not shy 10-year-old girl, right at the door, she took off her short skirt under his attention, unbuttoned her blouse and appeared before him in nothing but black stockings and lace panties of the same color. Alexey's head was spinning. He decided that again no one would know about this. The stupid idiot the second time was naturally smarter and used protection. But the first time the blood rushed to his head. Everything was jumping and spinning in his eyes. What kind of protection is there on this? He didn't even remember then. You slept with your son's fiancée. His wife's indignant scream brought Alexey out of his memories. This for your own son? Isn't it disgusting to you? Or did you silently expect Kostya to continue sleeping with his future wife? Angry, no. Of course he didn't want Kostya to marry this bum. When Olga went to his house, he openly declared this, but she didn't care. She called him a curmudgeonly old man. Your mouth. Strictly for the intended purpose. This happened only twice. I myself don't understand how a son can fall in love with such a depraved girl. Only close people can criticize me, and now you are a stranger." For me, she was shaking her whole soul. It was disgusting to look at her husband's guilty face. It was disgusting, Alexey, although,
Ash.
I tried to control myself, but it was clear that she was very worried about his mood. Now she didn't care about the wound she had given to her husband's love. She didn't think about it either. She needed to talk to her son. It still didn't fit. Own father could do this, and Olga is a good bride. She can't say anything. She hasn't married yet, and has already raped the bones. Branched horns. You could understand her if Alexey was rich and expensive gifts to give her. What will happen next? Natalya picked up the phone. Who are you going to call? Please don't rush. Give me a son tomorrow. Let's call him home, and I'll tell him everything myself. Let him leave the old woman and let him go to the panel. Natalya smiled. No. Dear son should know who he lives with, and she won't postpone the conversation. Mom, hello? Something happened. You never call so late. Natalya tried to prepare herself. No. Son, nothing happened. I only have two news, one bad and the other so. Which one is better to start with? I'm tense. Well, let's start with the one that is more or less your father and I are getting divorced. Kostya whistled in surprise. Anything? To yourself, what happened? And here we come to the most important thing. Your father and his future wife are sleeping. Without hearing anything in response, Olga and her father explain like lovers, apparently believing that her mother is not herself. Kostya laughed hesitantly. If you don't believe me, come visit us. You can only take Olga by taxi. Call me to drive yourself. Don't get on the phone. There was silence on the phone. My father admitted it himself. I wanted to leave one more news for a snack, but so that you don't have any doubts anyway. Your Alya infected your father with a bad disease, and he is sure of me if you pass. The tests will definitely reveal that you have a Trini. Natasha was silent and looked back at her husband's with her hands. Alexey, apparently he was thinking about how he would explain to his son. Mom, in your mind you barely squeezed. Kostya, son, I am of sound mind and with memory. Take your Alya and come. Daddy, I can't wait. With anxiety. Wait. I missed my beloved. At that moment Natalya couldn't stand it and cried. Mom, calm down. Don't cry. We will go now. If this is true, then I promise you they will answer for each tear. Her son's loud breathing gave way to short beeps. Natalya. She wiped away her tears. It's not for nothing that they say from love to hate. One step now. It seemed that she hated this person with every fiber of her soul. The bastard. Now let him live as he wants and with whoever he wants. And his son, yes, Kost will not disappear after the second year. He transferred to a correspondence course with a friend. They opened a company selling spare parts. It's still big, but the guys are trying. Anyway, he doesn't to take money from him and his father. He pays for the rented apartment and goes to detain his girlfriend literally an hour later. When Natalya undressed and went to take a shower, a squeak was heard in Alexey's door lock. Very nervous, his hands gripping tightly onto the arms of the chair with a guilty smile on his face, he nodded at his son and immediately turned around. Hello, Mom. Kostya said hello, and Alya followed him into the apartment. The fact that Kostya didn't say anything to her, Natalya understood immediately. Smiling at her, that Isa looked at Alexey between. Son, I'm always glad to see you, but I wouldn't have seen your whore forever. After seeing how Olga was to Alexey in a cruel way, and went on to say that it is true that the cat's eyes pass. Dear, tell your future husband how you can sleep immediately. Two men. Natalya herself even offered to take Olga with her son. Now I realized that the visit of this dissolute girl had gotten a little carried away and was incredibly calming so as not to break down and not shamelessly grab her with her nails. True, very close to the threshold, Kostya asked a question, looking closely at the bride's face, and turned his gaze to his father sitting on a chair, and seemed even afraid to look in his direction. Under the gaze of Natalya, took off her shoes, entered the hallway, sat down on a chair and crossed his legs purposely. There was no point in opening the door as soon as Olga entered the house in Natalya's face, and immediately realized that she knew everything. What you wanted from me? Olga shrugged her shoulders and looked directly at Alexey. Let your husband tell how he came to visit us with wine and knew for sure that he wouldn't stay at home all night. She seduced me and then attacked me while the headboard resisted. But Lyosha didn't care about me, my son, my wife. At that moment, he was thinking only about himself. Alexey was silent, arguing, doing apologies, putting the blame on Olga. He didn't want to let the Supreme Court say he wanted his guilt. He couldn't deny. Everyone gathered in the morning. He was rehearsing a speech. He dreamed of repenting to his son. But again he postponed the conversation until better times, knowing very well how everything could end. The wife is not the type of woman who will tolerate betrayal, and the son Kostya should be happy that he did not have time to marry this trash. The young man will quickly forget this naughty girl. His father, why are you silent, and what can I say? I must. Guilt in front of my mother. In front of you I feel like the last piece of shit in the world, hiding my eyes in shame. Alexey said, almost inaudible. It's all your fault. Olga screamed. He left me. He went to the wedding, and Koka Semyonova's girlfriend only managed to leak incriminating evidence about you there with some girl. Asked her to dance several times or thought she wouldn't recognize anything. But I decided to take revenge. If from you. He dressed well and went to his father. Natalya Leonidovna was studying, pursing her lips, looked arrogantly at Natalya. So take your Lyosha. I hope Alexey doesn't mind then. He turned his gaze to his wife. He didn't even look at Olga. Why do I need this? This girl let him find another idiot for himself. Of course, I'm very guilty about my son in front of you. Nada. But I'm glad I managed to open my eyes, you say. A lot? Do you think I didn't notice how you always looked at me and licked me? Olga said sarcastically. Yes, seriously. Don't flatter yourself when my son is expelled. How Kostya didn't see through you before. Without thinking for a second, Alexey jumped from the chair, grabbed Olga by the collar, and dragged her to the exit. Kostya and Natalya, and with their mouths open they watched with interest as the lovebirds had fun. They look at each other with the infection in someone else's underwear. How many other idiots are there who don't know you infected them? Ask your son. I've never had anyone but him, and he's going home, packing his things, so that tomorrow morning there will be no spirit in the apartment. You understand me? Kostya said. No. Natalya snorted. No one needs him here, and he brought enough dirt. So let him take his lover by the hand and enjoy her. With a young body you look younger, and I don't need it here. NATO, don't go too far. Let Olga go wherever she wants, and I won't leave here anywhere. This is my apartment. Something silently in my ear. Alexey's face changed instantly, and Olga, jokingly, Polma left the apartment with her whole hand, slamming the door behind her. Alexey, with a thoughtful face, entered the hall and sank into a chair. Then he wanted to sit next to his son on the sofa, like in the good old days, to hug and ask for forgiveness. But the son is out of patience. Unfortunately, I can't fix it. Nothing. Alexey dared to get up, eyes, and looked at my son. It's too late. I should have thought sooner. Better go. I don't know about Mom, but I hate looking at you. If you had behaved in front of me and maybe even forgiven me. But you didn't do that. You didn't stop there. Kost seemed calm, but Natalya felt it. I understand you. I would have disrupted your marriage anyway. I don't know how, but I wouldn't allow you to do that. Marry that damn thing, Alexey repeated. If you don't want me to kick you out like I did your lover, then you better shut up. It's funny for me to listen to you. Kostya, son, me. I don't know what came over me. I understand this is no excuse for NATO. He left without holding back, shouted, Kostya's gone. You lost me exactly at the moment when Alya moved the slingshot correctly. Son, let him scratch your beloved and you will live with me. Let them live in your apartment rented by the third part of our apartment. We will pay enough for a hut, they say, with the darling in the hut. The sky is throwing fuel on the fire. Natalya. Kostya got up. He went to his father himself. Or to help you. Why should I leave? I'm in my rod. Someone doesn't like it. Let him be the most. Ash. Alexey comes out with his arms crossed over his chest. Kostya did not even notice how he grabbed him by the collar and not paying attention to the resistance, dragged him to the door. Natalya jumped up and also started pushing Alexey in the back. In the hall, she took a raincoat from the closet and placed it in Kostya's hands, who opened the door and threw it away. Slam the door, Mom. I still can't believe he could do this to me, okay? Olga, to hell with her, it's a shame. Infuriatingly disgusting. My soul hurts, but I love her. Over time, I will forget to scratch my life well. Dad, I don't understand. Having slept with my fiancée, I slept peacefully, ate, drank, smiled, as if nothing had happened. I was communicating with horror. Son, that's not the main thing for you now. You need to show Zavra. If the diagnosis is confirmed, start treatment. I would enroll you in your clinic, but you should not give people information to think about. Taking a deep breath, you stroked your son's head. You yourself, like Natalya, waved your hand. Tomorrow will be better. I didn't think that your father would put such a pig on us. He looks smart. Rudny SDI cattle. Tomorrow I'll call a lawyer and ask for a divorce. I can't see this bastard. As soon as the door slammed behind Alexey, he looked around, put on his shoes, put on a raincoat until none of the neighbors noticed him like that, picked up his bag from the floor. They went crazy. They didn't listen properly. They didn't understand. Thrown out of the apartment like trash. They made a demonstration, as if something out of the ordinary had happened. I think I went to the left a few times. Many families face betrayal, and that's it. It's good if the wife is smart and understands that it's both of them and the son's fault. I also have to think, because of some girl, only a fool can raise his hand against his father. But if he lives to the age, he will understand that there are no holy men. Alexey assumed that he would not be allowed today at home, but he still got up the courage and pressed the bell again. Of course, no one was open with different thoughts. What worried me most about the World Cup was that he was going to work tomorrow, he said. A message first to his wife, then to his son. But they didn't even read it. They went out, started the car, went to see their son. They have the same size clothes. They still don't have bones. Rummage through your wardrobe to find something decent at the World Cup tomorrow. You can go to work hanging on the staff and part-time. The director's wife asked for permission to temporarily stay in the office apartment. The personnel officer hesitated, but then agreed that I had that pass by her through the keys. Hello, you will murmur through Olga's lips. Seeing the bags collected in the hallway, Alexey closed the door behind him, took off his shoes and carefully packed his son's things. Olga asked with excitement, resentment, and dashed hopes for. A useless year of my life wasted. I was kicked out of the house after you. Tomorrow I have nothing to work on. Alexey didn't take his eyes off his work. He didn't want to look at Olga. You better tell me where the infection came from. If I knew that you weren't like that, now my whole life would be turned upside down because you put on his jacket. He was spinning near the mirror. He's leaving tomorrow. All the employees will be dressed in their fashionable clothes. He threw the Nazca denim shirt in his bag. I have no idea. Tomorrow I'll go to the doctor. How I'm going to live now, I don't know. I'll have to study more. A year. I will have to transfer to correspondence. Biting her lip, Olga looked at Alexey. Lyash, I'm pregnant. I'm not kidding. It's your son. Kostya doesn't even want to hear about children yet. He always uses protection. I didn't even want to talk about it. Tie the child to him. He wouldn't go anywhere. I allowed him to leave it on purpose. You didn't say anything to him. You waited for time so as not to have an abortion. But given recent events, it won't be possible to do that. Olga remained silent. Alexey picked up his sports bag and folded his things. Few more minutes passed before he spoke to you in your mind. What kind of child can there be? You first get a wound. Heal yours. Don't even regret it. She and Natalya will turn all the arrows against me, and I don't give up hope of making peace with my wife. And you looked at her from head to toe until you finally crawled under the skirting board. No waste time. Run to the doctor tomorrow. If the diagnosis is confirmed, the doctor himself will send you to be hospitalized, and if you suddenly decide to give birth, you will be a fool. The child may be born with disabilities. While waiting, I read in detail about this infection. When Olga quietly whispered that she was expecting his child, I remembered that doctors do not recommend giving birth in such cases by hanging. Carrying a bag on her shoulder, Alexey walked to the front door in despair. Olga covered her face with her hands, and she began to cry in her skeletal parents' apartment. She was still holding on. Completely broken. Goodbye. Oh, I hope we don't see each other again. Alexey finally left, and before she stopped him, he ran to leave the apartment, looked in the mirror. She was slightly horrified by the sight. The dark circles gave her face a tired look, an absent expression. Lord, what did she look like? A nurse greeted her today with a smile, and procedurally, it means that the rumor has already spread throughout the clinic, and that's how looking people in the eyes now. Upon hearing the ringing of a cell phone, she opened her bag and took a deep breath, froze for a second. Margarita called before answering the call, just in case. She sat down on a chair. Good morning, Margarita. What will Vladimirovna be happy with? Natasha said almost inaudibly in the hope of a quick and successful ending, mentally crossing her fingers. Hello. It immediately became clear from her voice that Margarita would not make her happy. Natasha. There was no mistake. The diagnosis was confirmed. Natalya immediately went to the chief doctor. To avoid unnecessary conversations, she had to tell the story of her husband's infidelity, and so that her colleagues would not look at her, ask for a vacation, resolve all her affairs urgently after treatment, take tests to get rid of an unwanted pregnancy, only then return to his place of work. The head doctor entered the situation without further ado, signed the leave application. The girls at the reception immediately started calling clients who would make an appointment in advance. Natalya, having closed the office, she immediately went to the law office. Closing the door behind Alexey, Olga stood for a long time, looked at the packed bags, and could not understand what to do next if she really is a carrier. Infection. So only one person could set it up in such a vile way and not feel remorse towards Yuri's companion, Bones. She accidentally walked into a nightclub. It was a classmate's birthday. Kostya, citing a headache, refused to go. The devil pulled her to respond to this urine kiss. Both did not realize how. They met in some dark corners. The kisses were lowered to the cleavage and then lower. Then the goat took advantage of the fact that she was drunk, but the next day they called on the phone. At first they laughed a lot, and then they decided that they would both happily forget this misunderstanding that Olga forgot. You could say that she didn't even remember. I didn't sleep almost all night. I listened to every rustle. I went to the window several times. I was afraid that the carpet would start a scandal during the night, and then I looked around the apartment and grabbed her by the collar. Well, you're rubbish. I only had the diagnosis confirmed by the doctor, both for me and my mother. If you don't tell me who got the disease from, I'll bury you. I'll force you to pay moral compensation. Your whole dorm is going to be screwed. Everyone is going to find out why the wedding was upset. Well, what does this have to do with me? You infected me. I saw pictures of how you got along at a wedding with a girl, confident in her, and caught the thunder, Olga shouted. I had nothing to do with her. Unlike you, I don't jump on other people's posts. I'm used to judging everyone by my own standards. I pushed her away from me. He kicked his bag in anger. Olga moved away from him to a safe distance. Her carefree life is over now. She will have to save literally on everything. Count every penny. God. Why didn't Alexey vs tell the story that he slept with some intern who came to work with him and gave up a month later and went to another city? Kostya, pregnant. I doubted until the last moment whether it was worth talking, but I still took a breath, decided to listen to my intuition, and pulled the last trump card out of my sleeve. What do you said? You sleep with everyone in the child. I decided to hang it around my neck. Think about it. Who else can claim it? Maybe my father. Now I understand what you whispered in his ear, or maybe the one from whom we all in turn caught your infection. How many more deer are running around the city with horns like mine? Kostya began to laugh, pointing his finger at her things, took the flag in his hands and left here. God forbid. See what happens to you. Get up, get out of here. Cleaning service will be here in an hour. After you. Until yesterday, Olga considered herself lucky. She was sure that Kostya loved her and would not allow her to become a single mother, But now she looked at him and did not recognize her. She understood that something had to be done with the pregnancy, why she needed a child. No one needed him in the first place. What could she give him without money, without a husband, at best? Send a bone to my parents in the village. Maybe you can donate at least a little money. They were always against me working. I don't even have pills to buy money. Of course it wasn't much, but for the first time it's enough. My parents sent me monthly, and Kostya gave it to me for small expenses. If you tell me who else she cheated on me with besides my father, maybe he throws it incinerates me to tell you about the river. A friend works together. They immediately agreed that no one would know their little secret, but now you need to think about yourself first and not about Yurka. This is Yura Petrov, your companion. Kostya has already whistled. There is at least one more person in the city with whom the girl he considered his bride just yesterday had not slept with him. It just seemed cruel. It seemed like if Olga said something, he would just shut down in anger. The day before yesterday, the girl sent him too. Photo of the test phone with 2 stripes. He was so happy, and today his partner called in the morning and said that after lunch he and Luba were going to Zoxa to register. You didn't get anything confused? He asked again, just in case. It didn't fit in my head how disgusting and tragic it all seemed. No. Don't tell me that you promised to transfer some money for information. Remind me, get out of here. Open the front door wide. Olga sighed calmly. Only when leaving the apartment, Kostya didn't even help take out the suitcases. She slowly carried them into the elevator. The neighbor on the first floor, he helped me take everything to the street while I waited for the taxi. Everything inside was closed with resentment and a hastily made decision to get rid of the rent. But I understood that Virgo had nowhere to go. I signed up for Prim, and only then realized that Kostina works in the same clinic. At first, my mother wanted to refuse the appointment, but then changed her mind. Why should she hide from everyone if they don't want publicity? Thinking twice, I typed a message to Lyosha. Now I'm going to see a doctor at the clinic where your wife works. If you don't want a banner with Natalya's name on every corner. Leonidovna gives me money for silence. She indicated a round amount. And if you don't transfer, the doctor will find out everything to the smallest detail. And the atmosphere was so disgusting, and when Alexey saw the message received from Olga, he barely managed to stop himself from throwing the phone against the wall. He reread it several times. He realized that Olga had gone too far and would stop at nothing. At first I didn't want to answer. Then I finally wrote to Olga, "Don't deceive my wife. Don't you dare disgrace these heads. I'll bite my head off when I see that the addressee is typing a text. I didn't leave Lyosha's application to the state. I'm not going to the clinic if you want me to save you from all your problems." Answer. Alexey thought a little and decided not to aggravate the relationship and pay hell with this money, but he will sleep peacefully at the moment. I can only give it to you half of what you want. For more you can give it to me. So after those days, Alexey shuddered with disgust. Let him refuse. He won't get anything. No. If within 2 hours the balance on my card is not replenished by the amount I indicated, wait for new problems. I have nothing to lose. You love me. Walk through the hills, love, and carry the sleds for an hour. I thought that some more SST would do anything. I had to go to the accounting department and ask for an advance, and after an hour and a half I decided not to tempt fate and send her money card. After meeting with the lawyer, Natalya went out into the street as a completely different person, having filed for divorce. She imagined her husband's perplexed face and smiled. Let him not think that she is the woman who will tolerate his betrayal or attack on the road. She will be able to defend himself and avenge his only. My son, carried away by his thoughts, did not notice how she stopped the car near work. Remembered that while getting ready to run, she forgot her diary and her son's gift, a Parker pen. Completely forgot that she needed to go to Margarita and discuss further actions with her. Turning off the engine, Natalya sat in the car for several minutes. She didn't want to go back to work and meet the scorching looks of the employees who were probably jumping around the reception. I heard a familiar voice. What kind of meeting? Natalya Leonidovna did not think I would see. You again? Olga was putting some papers in her bag. Hello. Stopping for a second, Natalya snorted. Seeing how Olga's lips curled into a crooked smile, she turned and nodded briefly goodbye and went down the hall. It was very unexpected that Natalya was confused and could not understand what was happening now in Olga's head after she was thrown out of the house in disgrace. You could expect anything from her. Natalya tried to hide her trembling. She wanted to appear strong, but she was having trouble nearby. Daisy's office. She sat down on a chair before looking at the office. She needed to catch her breath and come to her senses. Natalya Leonidovna, why were you running away from me before? They treated me much better. Olga joked, lowering herself onto the next chair. What do you need without turning your head? Natalya muttered under her breath. I sent you a message and you didn't respond. Pursing her lips, Olga took her bag, took out her phone. I would like to see. No, Natalya replied briefly, looking curious. Natalya Leonidovna, my silence is expensive. Lyosha has already paid me, now yours. In turn, I don't want a scandal, but don't get me wrong. I'm a country girl, a student. Where can I get the money for the treatment? You know the doctors, just get tests, medicine. An hour spent at your medical center, it has already cost me a good amount, and perhaps there will be more. At that moment, Olga was watching Natalya's surprised face and she was having fun. She would do anything to not tarnish her name. Now beside her, Olga felt like a hunter, having cornered a wild animal, and I didn't even know you were trash. Everything that you did and dared to approach me, if you live by the principle of impudence is the second happiness, then this number will not work with me. For which Natalya smiled. No, dear, I will not pay you anything. But you will behave rudely. I'll sue him myself. I think your parents won't like your new job. Don't forget that the clinic is under video surveillance. My eyes, I'm not afraid. You'll tell me, well, I didn't get into my future father-in-law's panties before the wedding. Fortunately, Margarita Vladimirovna went out into the corridor. She did not allow a scandal to break out. After looking closely at the previous OL, took Natalya by the hand and led her to the office. Natalya Leonidovna, why did you scream so loudly? Hatred. Tears flowed from her eyes. This is my failed daughter-in-law and also my husband's lover. I assume that it was from her that my husband brought an infection. She wants me to pay for her silence. She did not understand how she told Margarita everything that was in her soul. She only came to her senses when she handed her a glass of water, probably for me. I'll have to give up. Natalya smiled tensely. Well, what else was missing? Margarita shrugged her shoulders. You'll be cured as good as new. You think you're the only one who caught your husband's infection. If they start talking, don't pay attention. You are not the first. You are not the last. They will forget to talk. Be patient. Everything will be fine with you. You are seriously confused? Asked Natalya. Well, of course. Seriously, well, I found something to worry about. Kostya, honestly, the devil confused us then. I thought that we would break up forever. I didn't leave the clubs. I drank with sadness. Uralia. I came across this. I wanted to tell you everything, and she called in the morning and started crying and started attacking that I pinched her against her will. You understand what I did. So I offered to shut up so I wouldn't tell you anything. At first I didn't agree, and then I was afraid that you wouldn't believe. Especially since Olga lived what she loved you, and this will never happen again. Yura looked long and intently into her friend's eyes, firmly holding her hand to the nose that Kostya had run over, and then he made peace with him lovingly and stopped everything with women and drank shmyga, added that Yura Olga infected me. Strong wound. I had to press a little. I confess that I got it from you. If that's the case, then Kostya paused and barely restrained himself from hitting him on the nose again. Yuri said, almost inaudible. To be honest, I really haven't been feeling very well lately. I think I've always been defending myself, but you understand when you're drunk, anything can happen. Lyudka will kill me. She went to the doctor today. She wants to register for pregnancy. So you have made up. Natalya came home late at night and talked a lot with Margarita. Her meeting with Vladimirovna had already ended, but she was in no hurry to leave Natalya with feelings of sadness. His head was just splitting his temples. The sofa and closed his eyes only opened when Kostya opened the door with the key and went home. Hello, Mom. I decided to spend the night with you again today. Like I was cleaning, I washed everything in the apartment, but I cannot be present. It is disgusting that Natalya was terribly upset not only for herself, but also for her son. Their diagnosis only confirmed the fact that this couple thought only about pleasure and did not think about the consequences. Don't be upset, son. God is their judge. Today I met with a lawyer. Time to marry her. You not only betrayed her, but she also rewarded everyone with illnesses. Fact that Olga demanded money, but the words rolled off her tongue. Today she dragged her to my work and started demanding money. I was waiting for her. I'll get scared and untie, as always. I just had to press her a little. I instantly took off the good mask and showed her true face, a hypocrite. Seeing her son's surprise, Natalya was silent again. I still managed to didn't believe that this modest girl turned out to be a real monster. I didn't think that Olga would decide to earn extra money like that. Dare to come to She also asked me to work with you, but I couldn't stand on ceremony with her. I grabbed her by the back of the head and threw her out of the apartment. Mom, don't worry, she won't come to you anymore. If one person doesn't get it right, you will. To point this out to her. Place, son, don't get your hands dirty. I don't want you to get involved in this story. Let Daddy solve all her problems. By the way, Olga told me today that Natalya's last words were, he said before teasing Olga. Kostya laughed. Yes, Mom, I won't get my hands dirty. Don't worry, from tomorrow this rubbish won't bother you. Now it will be the 10th way for you today. Olga not. Go to university again. Yes, what the hell is studying? The girls in the room tormented you with questions, and why is Kostya so good? Why are you? I broke up with him, that's all. They need to know the answer, that they didn't get along with their personalities. They weren't satisfied. They went to the clinic again. They failed to spend money, but they still called a taxi. The money is still on the card, but if you keep spending at this rate, you will have who turned to her parents again and gave her hers as much as she didn't want. A car stopped next to her. A young man rolled down the window, and the girl smiled sweetly. Who offended you? You are so sad and may disappoint. You. Olga was surprised. Well, why not? What if it was her fate? Just in case, that dictated her address. I watched his reaction carefully. Suddenly, out of the way, the stranger got out of the car and opened the back passenger door. At first, Olga wanted to be indignant and sit next to the driver, but at the last moment she changed her mind and sat in the back seat, literally on the corner. The stranger stopped and two more unpleasant men got into the car alone. I immediately placed my hand on Olga's knee, and the second approached in a professional manner and hugged her shoulders. You are, what do you need? If you have money, then you are at the wrong address. I live in a dorm, and I'm cutting myself from pennies to pennies. Sergey's penny. Did you happen to forget to throw a shovel in the trunk? Asked the one who was holding her by the knee. Seryoga shook his head confidently. Threw two, and just in case. Suddenly one of the handles breaks. How do we bury? Who are we going to bury? Without pay attention to her captors, she took her cell phone out of her side pocket, but whoever was holding it by her knee grabbed it and, without any regret, threw it away again. Do something without my permission. See what happens, Seryoga. She is not pretty. If she wasn't sick, I would have had her sooner. Barry with pleasure taught a lesson. Squeezed my knee tighter. Let me go. I'm pregnant, said Olga, sniffling. We know everything about you. Alia sit calmly. Don't waste your nerves. Kostya asked us to bury you in the Lesnoy Massif, so that wouldn't anyone know where you are. This is how we have to catch our future husband. Why did he decide to do this, and what kind of money do we need to bury someone out of fear? A ruthless idiot, yes, just a brute, ready to tear her apart for some damn money. And he also said, what Grosh loves is the price of his love. Call Kostya. I will explain everything to him. I promise not to bother him anymore. I will give my word of honor that he will never hear from me again. Unwanted tears appeared in his eyes again. Sniffing Olga's nose, began to rub his eyes. It's too late. We should have thought before that we are not fools to refuse the dough, answered Sergey, entering the forest, turned off the road at a reasonable distance, stopped the car. We take 2 shovels out of the trunk for now. Let's smoke and you start digging. The 3 of us sat on a fallen tree. The phone answered the call. He left in about 2 minutes. His happiness returned. Kostya felt sorry and decided to let you go. But remember, if, God forbid, you open your mouth, then we ourselves will bury you. I don't need problems. You understand me? Olga nodded confidently. The whole trinity smiled and sat in the car under the road Enoka Nome, but they were covered in dirt. Out of sight, she exhaled in relief, slung her bag over her shoulder, and walked towards the road. Let Kostya and his fucking family choke on money. She didn't think he. Completely frozen. Well, it's okay. She won't touch any of them again. Let them live while killing calmly. The most important thing is to heal, and then time will tell. Maybe we will have to give birth to the bones of a brother, although the brother can very well be a son or a darling and a daughter. Everything seemed to be going according to plan so far, until Olga got into the car with Sergei. Well, the idiot should have guessed right away that this was a cheap trick. And don't let his fake smile fool you. When she reached the highway, she changed her mind about many things, even made some conclusions for herself, and finally came to her senses. The only reasonable decision to try to earn extra money can really leave you headless. Kostya is not Alexey. It's a bad joke with him. It's worth remembering how the henchman coldly threw her phone onto the road and her heart instantly shrank. The size of a tennis ball. Thank God they didn't throw away the bag you can buy a phone, but a passport, a bank card that would take a long time to restore. Reaching the road, Olga held it out, hand for about minutes. No one paid attention, only when she lost all hope that anyone would take pity, and an old Ziguli car stopped next to her. Hello? The man drove into the city, nodded silently. Olga opened the front door and with a sigh of relief sank into the front seat. She could barely unlock it. Buried him in the forest for a long time. She couldn't sleep until morning, almost a lot of clothes. How much money can she spend on buying new ones? The bone or his mother, but then again, you could try crying into Alexey's vest by paying for the next reception appointment. I stopped near the gynecologist's office for about 5 minutes. I didn't dare go in, so I pulled myself together and walked in with confidence. Hello, I was at your appointment yesterday, but the results of my repeat test were coming in. Come in? Sit down. Olga only opened her mouth to remember her last name, and the doctor interrupted her. Olga Nikolaevna, I can't make you happy. Repeated tests reveal that you have trichomoniasis. It's up to you to decide, of course, but with this diagnosis, it is dangerous to give birth to one's son. Personally, I advise you to first undergo treatment and then terminate the pregnancy. But Dr. Olga's words were not surprising. Deep in my soul, there was still a small hope that this would pass and the diagnosis would not be confirmed now. I will prescribe the necessary medicine for you. You will take it strictly according to the schedule and let your partner know so that he can too. Go to the doctor. The gynecologist passed the exams and started the treatment. Everything at the pharmacy after the treatment. Take the exam again, and then we decide what to do with your pregnancy. The doctor set a deadline of 2 weeks. There was still time. Time to think. That Olga lowered her eyes and looked briefly. With my eyes, according to the prescription, I will no longer detain you, said the doctor in an indifferent voice and turned to the monitor. I can have an abortion today. You scared me that the child could be born sick, and the calculator in my head has already called approximately how much this pleasure will cost. A little expensive, of course, but quick and time-consuming. Theoretically, making a medical abortion in the early stages, perhaps in parallel it will be necessary to take prescribed therapy against infection, but I'm not going to take that risk. Let's go. First we will be cured, and then we will think about what to do next. I try to calm you, doctor, but I can change my mind. It's your right. Open the internet if you don't believe me. Read it yourself. What could be the consequences? The doctor tried to reason and avoid mistakes. You was saying that it is theoretically possible to get rid of the pregnancy. Olga was not going to give up. I thought that now I have time for a medical abortion, and after the treatment, I will. I have to have another one, and this is an additional cost for anesthesia. I will have to pay a lot of money. Amount. The doctor looked at the tests again right in front of him, called someone, explained the situation several times, repeated the diagnosis several times after reminding him again on the phone that Alya should undergo treatment. Remembered the consequences the day after tomorrow at? Come to the abortion center. Show your passport at the reception. The girls will be on course. They will explain what to do next. Kostya entered the office in the morning, and the unpleasant smell made him sick. On the leather sofa Yura was sleeping, while he smelled smoke from a kilometer away. And by appearance it was clear that companion again took the glass. You are lying here, muttered with displeasure. Kostya first opened the window after he hit Yuri with all his might. Diarrhea. A black cat ran between them. The relationship became tense. They communicated only strictly for work. Yurka, of course, tried make an amendment. Kostya didn't hold much grudge against him, but I wasn't prepared to communicate like before. This time I got pregnant for good. I took a pregnancy test there, you understand. She said she was going to get treatment. Then she would have an abortion, a conversation about this subject. Quite tired of the confrontation, the cries to sort things out as much as possible. Kostya knew that Yura, as soon as he found out about the wound, immediately rushed to the doctor and passed all the tests just in case. Having received a disappointing diagnosis in his hands, theoretically he was ready for a big scandal. But when Luba kicked him out, he couldn't stand it and broke down. And you, I thought she would pat you on the head. Kostya smiled. No, well, I hoped she would understand. We broke up at that moment, but she didn't want to hear anything. She put things on the landing, changed the locks, and I no longer have money to buy an apartment in the world. Maybe it's good that the son turned out to be such an idiot. He hardly respects himself, and sat in a chair with a prayer in his eyes, and asked Kostya to make coffee. At that moment, Alexey entered the office. His face looked pale. Good afternoon, Kostya. Can I talk to you? Come in, Alexey Petrovich, don't be shy here. Everything is fine. One might say close relatives. Everyone present slept with my future bride. They all caught the infection. It is still unknown which of them. The three of us will end up being the father of Algino's child with an undisguised agreement. You understood well behind my back. You were not the only one who slept with my fiancée. Dad also left his indelible mark for which he paid. Your family. Mom asked for a divorce. You didn't run to your father for this reason, son. I'm sorry. You sat down in the offered chair, unbuttoned your jacket, rolled your eyes, and slowly rolled into bed. Flor, Ko, and Yura thought that Alexey would take pity and put on another show, but when Yura decided to pick him up, he immediately. I realized that Alexey really felt bad. Kostya, urgently call an ambulance. Kostya slowly got up from the chair and approached his father. Together with Yura, they carefully lifted him and placed him on the sofa. Only when he realized that his father was distorted, he realized he wasn't joking and he really needed to call an ambulance. God, they arrived quickly. Kostya was not going to accompany his father to the hospital, but Yurka forcibly pushed him into the car, sat in the corridor for about hours. Then the doctor came out and said that his father had a stroke. He is now in the ICU. As soon as it gets better, they will be transferred to the ward. He dictated a telephone number that you can call to ask about the patient's health, and that's all good. As Alexey Petrovich came to his senses in alarm, asked Yurka. To be honest, after this terrible morning, Kostya looked at his companion with different eyes. Yurka, the good fellow, was not surprised at his father. At first I put the sofa, and after they called an ambulance, I quickly went online and he read that the patient needed to lift his head and legs. He unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. Really, while they didn't say anything, they gave me a phone number where you can call, and, swallowing everything, Kostya answered his mother. While he waited, he called her and said that his father felt bad. Until it bothered her. She said that's what this idiot should do. I asked her to find out about his well-being through her own channels, but his mother said he couldn't even move a finger in his head. He was complete mess. On the one hand, he was stinging his father, and on the other hand, his actions could not be explained. Music. Yura rubbed his temples. I have the feeling that we all bathed in the same dirt. Swamp, it's all my fault. You know, I thought about this a lot, and came to the conclusion that if it weren't for you, Kostya smiled thoughtfully, no one would have known anything. I would have married Olga and happily worn branched horns. Mom would never have seen her husband's true face. I would continue to love my father even if he didn't deserve it. Kostya was silent, looked thoughtfully at Yura, as if trying to find support in her eyes. And you know what I was thinking? I will take revenge on you with the same coin. In 2 months, I will start an affair with your darling, and that she is now a girl. Free, and we have a lot in common, so to speak. Friends in misfortune and all that. The bone eyebrows rose and the lips pressed into a thin strip on the outside. It seemed that the idea of starting an affair with Labasha completely absorbed him. What you said, repeat. I say, I always liked your Lyubka, true. I never considered her my girlfriend, but don't look at me like that. I should have thought when I slept with my fiancée, and now you want to take Olga with you. I'm not sorry. I bet nothing will happen right with you. And Anya. Yuri reached out to Kostya, raised an eyebrow in surprise. I won't agree with you. Kostya liked Yuri's stubbornness before. It seemed that if he set a goal for himself, he would achieve everything, but now this trait of his character infuriated him. So we will have to divide the business, work with you. I won't say it dryly. Yuri took the man's bag and left the office. Kostya arrived home late in the afternoon, hoping that his mother could not bear it, and went to his father. Or at least he was tired of waiting for you. But Kostya was already looking at his mother with a mask on her face. She was calmly lying on the sofa and watching some kind of soap opera. Mom, you called the hospital? How is Dad? No. Why are you and your dad getting divorced even if he remains incapacitated? I will not change my decision, and I do not advise you to fill it out. Your head with unnecessary information. It's a shame that I didn't have time to divorce this bastard. Yes. The priest was so friendly that I was friendly. I understand that Alexey Petrovich treated us as the last, but despite everything I understand that I can. Don't leave him in difficult moments. Kostya sighed heavily. I would like to suppress my emotions, crush them. But how to do this? Hatred was a complete mess in my head, mixed with resentment and pity. This is a Gorky cocktail to think productively. And what do you propose to bring this idiot here after everything he has done? Start taking care of him. Trying not to be nervous, asked Mother. Kostya looked at one point for a long time and didn't answer anything. Mom, well, somehow this doesn't fit. It turns out it's human, son. That's enough. I'm tired of everything. I don't want to talk about this topic anymore. Better there first. Let's see. Let's call his parents. They live in their own house. Maybe they'll take him to rehab. And what did they want? I didn't want to involve them in the fruits of my upbringing. But apparently I'll have to tell my grandparents everything. Days passed. Natalya was still on vacation undergoing treatment. She didn't put the problem on the back burner. She had an abortion for Margarita, secretly discovered that her husband's lover also didn't want to give birth, and got rid of Olga, and she had an almost identical period of unwanted pregnancy, weeks from the fact that her husband turned out to be a moral monster. Natalya still couldn't see him. Forgiving him was out of the question several times. To beg to go see his father in the hospital, Alexey was transferred from intensive care to a ward a long time ago. After a stroke, his right side was paralyzed. Alexey lost the ability to move his right arm and leg, and she left her husband on the farm and moved to the city at the hospital. She stayed with her son almost all day, and only returned home in the evening when Marina Alexandrovna found out why Natalya didn't want to laugh. Caring for her husband was in a state of shock. At first, she could not believe that Alexey could so mercilessly trample years of happy family life into the mud. She cried a lot, asked Natalya's grandson for forgiveness, said that she understood everything perfectly well, and after discharge he would take his son with him. Natasha, I understand that you are offended by my son. Well, maybe you should go to the hospital to visit Alexey. He constantly asks about you, but I don't know what to say. Natalya understood perfectly well that Alexey needed positive emotions from her husband's disgusting act in her soul before. It was still difficult, and I didn't want to see a person who would destroy the idea of a happy family life. And it's not for nothing that they say from love to hate, one step and so the feelings changed outside. Not only don't be stupid, they just disappeared once, and there is still no love, and perhaps there was never any respect and affection. In the end, all that was left was wild hatred. Marina Alexandrovna, it's difficult for me to tell you about this. I don't want to bother you, but I hate seeing Alexey. I can't. I asked for a divorce, but because of his illness I had to slow down. Process. I wish he makes a full recovery, but as soon as he gets better, we will get a divorce. Natalya had no intention of sharing her thoughts with her mother-in-law. She herself had to somehow get out of this dirty swamp. She tried to find an excuse for Alexey. I gave several arguments, but I never managed to change her decision. Kostya too. I am offended by my father, but despite everything, I pushed my offense away, and every day I go to see you in the hospital. You won't get any better if you visit your husband once. Kostya's son. I understand him. He is sorry for his father. I am proud if he didn't do it. He followed in Alexey's footsteps and did not abandon him in difficult times. But don't expect such a feat from me. I will never be able to forgive Alexey. Turning his gaze to Kostya to calm the situation, he began to count. Some nonsense, trying to change the conversation to another topic. He could also understand that Kostya did not want his mother and grandmother to fight. Marina Alexandrovna got up from her chair after taking a few steps and stopped abruptly. To go home. It will take a day or two. Grandfather is unable to take care of the housework. I have to die. I have to kill to eat meat. There was silence in the kitchen. The mother-in-law spoke in such a tone that no one dared to contradict her. Maybe I won't make it in days. I'll have to stay at home for another day. So I ask that you, Natasha, be prudent so that I don't worry. Leave your pride aside, and while I'm gone try to visit your husband without hearing anything in response. She grunted dissatisfiedly. I hope he doesn't lose sight of you and leaves the kitchen. His physical condition of course wanted the best, but Alexey hoped that his motor functions would definitely be restored. He was grateful to his son and, of course, they came to my mother every day, cheered me up, prepared me for recovery. It was a shame that Natalya could never forgive him. Every day he prayed to God that she would come to him in the hospital. He wanted to see Lowell, at least with one eye he twitched. Damn. Alexey tried not to contact Olga by thinking about bad things from this girl's memories. His moral state reached the bottom and sank to a level below nowhere. If it were possible to go back in time, he would never repeat such a mistake in his life. Alexey was interested to find out how his wife felt no matter how many times he asked his son. Kostya always answered the same thing. Everything was fine with his mother, but Natasha was pregnant lying in a hospital bed, pushing a pink stroller and a happy Natasha walking next to him. Yes, it's okay to dream. Not having time to get out of your dreams. Alexey turned his head at this time. His mother always came. He could set the clock for her. But when he saw that it was not, his mother-in-law was gone. Natalya did not want to fight with her only son's grandmother in response to her insistent request to push. Pride went to hell and visited her sick husband and didn't respond at all. Although from the expression on her face, it was clear that she did not miss Alexey, but apparently Marina Alexandrovna had her own opinion on this matter and was fundamentally different from the opinion of her daughter-in-law. Natalya, as always, was at home on vacation on the couch. She, of course, didn't like it very much, but clinging to not thinking about anything. Everyone is the creator and blacksmith of their own happiness. Already that Alexey decided to change his destiny and switch to young women, he pointed out that this was evil and ugly. Mom, could you please tomorrow? To go see her father in the hospital. Her son's question threw Natalya Kostya off balance. Why are you asking such stupid questions? You know perfectly well what the answer will be. Natalya muttered discontentedly, heating up dinner. Still hoping that this is a bad joke. Mothers, that's the case here. Kostya rubbed his temples thoughtfully. You won't think that I agree with my grandmother. No, honestly, I'm just saying that tomorrow is my day. Well, the wholesaler has arrived. It's crowded. I can't go to my father in the hospital, and Grandma left luckily. And you know what if she finds out she's the only one? Son, no one came? The blow is enough, Mom. Well, please help me. No one is asking you to forgive your father. It will just be a courtesy visit. Without answering anything, Natalya left the kitchen. Kostya already wanted to follow, but then stopping, she continued smiling and saying that everything will get better with time. Not me. Your father will not be little. He should understand what is good and what is bad. Don't be offended by flattering me later. Put it on with a good face when the game is bad. Natalya knew her son very well and understood that if he didn't agree, Kostya would tear his veins and hurry. Maybe I will postpone the planned meeting, but I will definitely visit her father. Thank you. You kissed her on the temple, and after that the floor had dinner. Before entering the room, Natalya Orla straightened her dress and threw a robe over her shoulders. In the morning, I woke up early to do a marathon. I wanted my husband to see her so beautiful and inaccessible, and I realized that he had slept with Olga and committed something irreparable and pat his mouth for a few seconds. They just looked at each other while lying on the hospital bed. Of course, was not at his best. It was immediately clear that he was confused. Natasha, thank you for coming. I'm very happy to see you. Alexey lowered his eyes. He tried to deal with his excitement. Several times he coughed. His voice sounded hoarse and barely audible on the left side of his chest. There was a treacherous tingling sensation seeing his husband, so lost it was unusual how you felt. Natalya sat down on a chair, put a bag of fruit on the bedside table, looked around, greeted my roommate better, Alexey said in a barely audible voice, looking to the side. We haven't seen each other for a long time, but we know each other. And we talked about nothing. That Natalya couldn't imagine this meeting. Even in a nightmare. After all, before they ate, she and Ale didn't even separate for a long time. So they didn't look at each other for a long time. But now everything was different. Alexey became more silent and looked to the side. Natalya didn't want to talk to him. No way. I'm happy for you. Marina Alexandrovna went home for a few days and Kostya is busy today. Asked him not to replace these words. Alesia, those who hear lice. Your wife will forgive you for a long time, but I still decided to support. In difficult times, I just felt I miss you so much. When you find yourself on the edge of life, and in death you start to think about life. Analyze your mistakes more. Natasha, if you can forgive me more than you and I don't have a son. Natalya tried to squeeze out a smile, but it didn't work out in her life. Alexey studied his wife's character perfectly. Therefore, now he perfectly understood that the smile is not real. Lyosha, this is not what you are thinking. You first need to take care of your health, said the wife calmly. She did not want to upset him, but she wouldn't give him hope either. Natalya looked into the face of her once beloved man and she understood that there was no more love, complete indifference. She tried to smile, but it didn't work. You will come tomorrow. Alexey himself did not understand why he asked, although he perfectly understood what the answer was. Would be negative. I will succeed in this scrupulous thing. Perhaps Marina Alexandrovna will arrive tomorrow. Natalya spoke slowly, choosing her words. It seemed like she just wanted to check a box and quickly leave. To get rid of him, Natasha Mom said that after the hospital she could take me to her house. Alexey was silent for a few seconds, as if waiting for her to start making excuses and denying. But there was no answer. I can stay with you. I don't want to go to my parents' house. My mother and I talked about this topic. Alexey again paused. If it's difficult, then my parents are ready to pay a nurse, but I still hope to recover quickly. Look. He tried to squeeze his palm a little of the paralyzed hand. Didn't work, but it still gave a slight movement. Natalya. She looked at her husband in amazement and didn't know what to answer. Alexey's return home was not part of his plans. Natalya didn't have a better answer. We will decide this issue later, when you are discharged. Natasha, if I were healthy, I wouldn't even argue. I agreed to all your conditions, but now a lot has changed. I want to live with you and Kostya. I talked about this topic. Of course, I offended him very much, but he does not hold a grudge against me and is ready to help. Alexey, Natalya said thoughtfully to her wife in the living room. Getting up from her chair, dealing with emotions was becoming more and more difficult. I think in this situation you can make your own decision. Bone before leaving the room, Natalya answered, and After saying goodbye dryly, closed the door behind her. I didn't dare drive in that state. I quickly left the hospital territory and entered the cafeteria. The room was small. There were few tables, and they were busy. After ordering coffee, Natalya went to the table where he was sitting. "Man, do you mind if I disturb your solitude without waiting for a response?" I casually threw my bag on the chair. I was tired. I sat on the opposite side, of course. How can I refuse such a beautiful girl? The pastries here are very delicious. You don't want to try them, seeing that Natalya only had coffee. The man waved at the waiter and ordered a cake. Natalya was silent. She did not have the strength to discuss anything. She was full of unpleasant thoughts after talking to her husband. Well, what a cheeky person. He needs to go home. He wants to come back. He hopes she does. Your brain is probably not right. Try the cake. After hearing the man's voice, grunted displeasedly. I don't eat sweets. Without finishing my coffee, I silently got up, picked up my bag, and, without saying anything else, slowly walked towards me. My car, the nervous tension of the last few days, was saying Kodo sweat Judge Mash hello, I'm not busy. Having heard that my friends don't have time to talk now, they agreed to meet in the evening at a cafe. That I found out that Masha also has problems in her family life. Her husband constantly disappears at work. And yesterday I found a well-wisher who sent him photos in which it is clearly visible with whom he spent his free time. Her precious husband, Zaid, and Kaya, tried to straighten her hair from the bag, took out lipstick, painted her lips, looked up. A man stopped next to her. His brown eyes with undisguised interest ran over her face, slowly descended. Well, here we are, and we meet again, mysterious stranger. Today we sat with you in a cafe, and you refused the cake just in case. Remembered God. A boring man. Natalya looked at he is as pleased as. The face of the March cat again did not answer anything. Opened the door and went out into the corridor with her head raised. Of course, nothing. Just that for some time now she was not interested in suffering because of them. She was no longer going to live with one years ago. Now she didn't know how to get rid of him for an hour. She and Masha, not paying attention to the problems surrounding each other. At one point Natalya even shed tears, but quickly pulled herself together and even smiled when the stranger from the coffee shop was nearby and politely invited her to slow dance. Masha didn't even have time to blink when her friend was already in the man's arms. She didn't expect to see you again, the hiss whispered. The stranger didn't hesitate for a long time. Very cool, Natalya. It seemed to me that this morning in the cafe you were upset about something. It seemed to him that I was not ready to share my problems with the first person I met. As soon as the dance was over, Maxim looked closely at her face, but he was in no hurry to let her go. Masha Nadash approached them. Can I see you for a minute? As soon as Max let her go and disappeared from sight, continued, can you imagine? The mother-in-law's son doesn't want to go to bed. He started crying. No one can calm him down. So excuse me. I need to go home urgently. Don't be offended. I have already paid the table and asked for a taxi. She waved her hand, blew a kiss and ran away. Natalya had no choice but to grab her bag and also leave the hall. You already home? Maxim asked in surprise, seeing her call a taxi. First I'll take you, and then myself home. Well, it's better for a beauty like that to walk alone until late, to ride in the same car with her. I didn't want to make new friends, but I didn't want to argue either, although Natalya tried to say goodbye to the man. But he immediately grabbed her elbow on the street, the car with checkers, and opened the back door. Natalya had no choice but to comply. The car stopped near her house. I paid the taxi driver and followed her to the street. He knows. Natalya looked up at the windows. Marina Alexandrovna stood by the window hour after hour. It didn't get any easier. She said it would take days and rushed to the next farewell. Natalya dialed the apartment number on the intercom. She opened the door, but Maxim gave me his phone number. I won't give up hope of inviting you to my favorite coffee shop and treating you to the cakes you've been waiting for. I didn't try his voice. It sounded calm but insistent. Natalya quickly dictated the phone number and finally entered. The entrance to call the elevator, she didn't walk up with the keys. She opened the front door. You are not wasting time while your husband is in the hospital with a stroke. You are having fun. The mother-in-law's dissatisfied tone made her tense at that moment. It seemed to Natalya that her heart was beating faster. I am taking the example of your son, taking the shoes, she said sarcastically. After everything her son did, she still had the audacity to make statements. There is no need to take an example. My son, first of all, Marina Alexandrovna's family couldn't stand it. She went into the hallway, sat on the sofa and cried. Kostya left her room. Mom, what happened? What happened, Grandma? Natalya cried silently, shrugged her shoulders, went to the bathroom, washed her hands, then went to the bedroom, took off her coat. The acute reason for the sudden change in grandmother's mood left her for a while and went to open it. There was a messenger standing on the threshold with a large bouquet. Kostya signed, took the flowers, took a small card from the bouquet, and read it out loud for everyone to hear. Thank you for the wonderful evening and the flowers. To be in a good mood, it seemed to Natalya that her heart sank. Just in case, Kostya reread the text about his mother once again and turned his gaze to Marina Alexandrovna, who was no longer crying. She looked at Natalya in amazement, and with one look was ready to tear her daughter-in-law to pieces. Natalya Leonidovna, you had an admirer? Asked Kostya hesitantly. It was noticeable on his face that he did not condemn her, and even on the contrary, he voluntarily supported his son only until the second stroke to send him to his parents and live for his own pleasure. The mother-in-law's voice sounded as if she was reading the verdict in court, looked intently at her grandson, and was absolutely sure that he was hers. Support be a stop going crazy. His own father is to blame for everything. He had a wonderful family. The wife who idolizes him wanted to be young. Those Kostya grimaced, gave Natalya the bouquet, took out a vase, poured water on it. Do you think mother is doing the right thing? Raising an eyebrow in surprise, asked to question the appearance of mother-in-law Marina Alexandrovna, now looked like a raging volcano from which a little more and the smoke will come out. I just want to convey to you that I understand my mother perfectly well. If at the moment I support what he did, I understood one thing for sure. You can't trust Alexey Petrovich, and Kostya Bobul continued. If you want us not to fight anymore, then behave prudently. You are still in your mother's territory. It's hard to irritate Natalya Leonidovna. It will be difficult. What makes you think that I'm on the territory is a shared apartment and you're visiting, especially since Alexey is sick. His wife doesn't want to take care of him. Of course, it's much more pleasant. Run to a date. They would be ashamed. Marina Alexandrovna cried again. Why shouldn't I be ashamed of your son? It was a shame to sleep with my son's fiancée, contract a venereal disease, and also reward myself with it by letting him be grateful that his son hadn't walked away from him. Flower vase on the chair, crossing her legs, working in the clinic. She knew many ways to resolve or smooth out conflicts with dissatisfied patients. I generally tried to behave correctly, but today I couldn't react calmly to my mother-in-law. I was pregnant and want to get tested. The venereal overcame itself, was able to spoil the soul, not only mine but also that of my son Natalya. It always seemed that Marina Alexandrovna treated her with respect and never pointed out any shortcomings. For years they never fought, even when there were small disagreements with her husband. A mother-in-law tried not to interfere. You were probably very upset when I found out that Alexey survived. Wiping her tears, my mother-in-law said quietly, Grandma, stop talking nonsense. But I was hoping you didn't touch your mother. Kostya looked at his mother sympathetically and decided to have a frank conversation. You can be silent. Why should she adapt to everyone? I feel that it will be very difficult for you and me to live under the same roof. Let's decide something to live with your son. I won't take care of him. Especially instead of resting at home, I have to listen to your unreasonable claims. Marina Alexandrovna, as long as I can. I am a living person and I want to live in peace. Choice: either you shut up or look for another place to live. Kostya apartment, not paying attention to his grandmother's displeased face. Thoughtfully rubbed his hands on his temples. Grandma, don't be offended, but Mom is right. I am completely on her side. She is a living person, has the right to express her opinion. So let's think logically. Did you react to my proposal to change to my rented apartment? Believe me, it will be much better for you there. My mother-in-law was visibly nervous at first, but literally after a few minutes I calmed down, and with a forced smile I spoke clearly. In syllables, I don't care. I'm ready to leave now. I don't feel comfortable here. I never thought there would come a time when I would bother you. Thank you, dear daughter-in-law, Grandma. Well, you can see for yourself that you and your mother won't get along under the same roof. It's not my fault that one can't keep quiet and the other. I couldn't help but react, looking at Natalya and surprised by her composure. Lowering his eyes again, Kostya rubbed his temples thoughtfully, opened his mouth to continue colloquially. Grandma. No. Yes, let me finish what you're trying to say with yours. Granddaughter, don't worry. I won't let you be torn apart by my son after he's discharged. I'll take Alexey with me. You won't be of any use. Live as you want, and with whoever you want. God be with you. Judge, just remember my words. God no Timashka sees a little, so as not to say too much. Marina Alexandrovna opened the closet, began to take her things off the hangers and put them in a bag. Kost tried again without speaking to explain his position, but Grandma was adamant. She was on her own wavelength and didn't want anyone to hear. As soon as the things were collected, Kostya turned to her grandson. If it's not difficult, take me to the apartment right now. Here, I don't want to stay for another minute. Kostya sat on a bench near the entrance to Lubino and thought about how to live. Besides, after last night, I took my grandmother to my apartment. I didn't want to, but I didn't feel like a demon had taken over her. As soon as they entered the apartment, she began to scold him, appeal to him. Your conscience, cry again. Remind him how ungrateful he and his mother were. It was useless to argue with her. She had an excuse. You will live before my age, you will understand, and when you have children of your own, you will remember of me. I had to leave her alone and go to my mother's house today. I met her in Boney. I walked away a little. I came to my senses. I realized that the older woman was wrong. To understand this well, it's not just that my mother gave up and doesn't want to take care of her father, but Marina Alexandrovna, apparently overnight, she was also moved by Kostino's greeting, spoke only to her son and answered his questions with disdain and contempt in whole words, and with all her appearance showed dissatisfaction after work. She didn't want to drive home. I didn't notice how I found myself near Luba's house. I came to my senses when I stopped the car near her entrance. Hello? What are you doing here? When I saw Luba's surprised face, I felt like a complete idiot who was completely. You know what to do in these cases. I wanted to see you. I didn't find anything more intelligent to answer. If you came to ask about your friend, then you can leave between us that it's all over, and tell Yurka let him stop writing messages from unknown numbers. I haven't got them yet. Read it, and will be immediately blacklisted. I wonder how dare he, after everything he has done, still ask for a chance and beg for a date? He is completely crazy. So tell him he will call me again. I have to ask my brother for help. Seva works in the police. He will take care of him quickly, but Luba will not mince words. It will rise in just a few minutes. All the points of the knot are clearly positioned strictly to the point. She said as she cut Lyab, let's go to the cinema tomorrow. When we saw your perplexed face, Kostya couldn't help but smile. Kostya, I'm not in the mood for jokes. Your friend is a very bad person. Stay away from him. You probably already know what to say. My God. I was embarrassed to even say it out loud. Luba, I know everything. That's why I came to you to support T. Prim. How if he was examining me through Luba? It made me somewhat uncomfortable yesterday and at university she met Olga and told her that she had broken up with Kostya. She did not give the reason, but it was clear that something had happened between them. I can't tomorrow without blinking. I lied for some. Now, Luba has been running away from men like the devil from incense. She didn't hold back. I was sitting at home at night, crying into my pillow. I didn't want to see anyone. Let's go the next day. Tomorrow, said Kostya. With no intention of backing down, well, unexpectedly for herself, Luba agreed. Let's go to the cinema. But I'm warning you, no advances and no hints, if you know that. What happened between Yura and me was that Kostya didn't let her finish. He raised his hands. Yes, I know everything. I agree to all your conditions after my mother-in-law moved to the apartment. Natalya didn't leave the house for a day. I did a general cleaning and washed the curtains, just in case. I washed the corners with bleach. Today I finally decided to go out and go shopping. Center and lock the car. In the same stores I heard a familiar voice chasing you, to which the man smiled impressively and replied with a slight half-closed look. I liked the flowers without waiting for a response. He continued. He wanted to impress you, and you didn't. I didn't even write a brief thank you because of your bouquet. My mother-in-law called me a walker and left the house at night. While they were near the escalator, Maxim tried to restrain himself from leaving in a good mood. It's bad for him, and where was her husband at that time? He said, but without smiling. And her husband ate too many pears, took a step to the side and went up the stairs. Escalator Maxim followed her and jumped on the step. Can you tell me more about your husband? He whispered softly in her ear. Maybe first we can go to a cafe. He held his hand and together with her went towards the cafe. Young. What do you allow yourself? I don't give my consent. Resisting a little, Natalya still couldn't help but smile back at Maxim. They were practically strangers, but in reality his company. She felt really good, despite her persistence. He didn't cause any negativity. So she didn't press too hard and the floor followed her. Then the meeting took place in a relaxed atmosphere. Sitting at a table in a cafe, they laughed and joked, having lost track of time. Natalya had already forgotten why she came to the store without noticing anyone around. Natalya suddenly felt someone's attention, slipping by. Looking at the visitors, she noticed her mother-in-law and then looked down at Marina Alexandrovna, standing near the showcase through the glass, looked at her. She and, without hiding her disdain, was talking to someone on the phone. There was no need to doubt that. The conversation was about her. When Natalya looked at her mother-in-law again, Marina was already approaching her with confidence, and Max, interestingly, told how he became a doctor. His choice of profession was not accidental. His father followed in his footsteps. Well, God himself ordered Maxim to be a doctor. After graduating from uni, he worked as a doctor for a long time in another city. Years ago, he separated from his wife and returned to his hometown. He got a job at the hospital where Alexey was hospitalized after a stroke. It turns out that Maxim noticed Natalya long before. She went to the hospital and almost knocked him over, but she didn't even apologize in her own way. She passed by the cafeteria. She also didn't pay attention to him a few times. She looked casually and turned towards the restaurant. She pretended that she wasn't interested in the slightest. Little for men. At first Natasha listened to Maxim with interest, but when I saw her near the window, my mother-in-law trembled as if she had been beaten. She could not smile. Hello, I saw my daughter-in-law and couldn't pass by. I decided to keep her company. I hope I didn't bother you. Without waiting for an answer, Marina sat down on an empty chair, unbuttoned her cape, and took off the scarf from around her neck. Maxim immediately fell silent, without taking his eyes off his mother-in-law's displeased face. He kindly offered her coffee, but Marina refused. How are you feeling? Turned to Natalya. His heart does not hurt. At least for the sake of decency, you asked how your husband was feeling. By the way, Alexey Molodets is trying to make progress every day. He is getting better. If his wife visited him even more often, the son would have more freedom. I look at you, Natasha, and I am surprised. You have always been so cruel, over the years. Consciousness lost. Marina Alexandrovna's questions remained unanswered, and the good-natured smile disappeared from Maxim's face. He became serious and excited, as if now he had entered someone else's family trying to destroy it. You know, a young man, you are caring for a woman whose husband is experiencing a stroke, and she, instead, to help, He lives for his own pleasure. And I just got back from the hospital. My son needs to buy new socks, panties, soap. Don't you think a wife should think about this and not a mother who? He abandoned farming in the village and came to the city to take care of his son, without wanting to justify himself to anyone. Natalya got up from her chair to prove to her mother-in-law that her son had achieved what he wanted. I wanted to spit in the sun and dirty the viru. Is it not yet clear to the woman that the issue of divorce can be considered almost closed? If you have everything, then I will go, said Natalya, not paying attention to the matter. Surprised Maxim, who also began to follow her. Natasha, I'll accompany you, he said hesitantly, as if he was afraid of being alone. Stay with Marina Alexandrovna? No, stay with me. My mother-in-law told me about myself. I think it will be interesting for you to hear what a disgusting wife and morally degraded woman I am. The next time you accidentally meet me, avoid me. It will be better for you. Otherwise, the time is irregular, and I will take you to a hospital bed to look at your mother-in-law's arrogant face. It was unbearable. It seemed that Marina Alexandrovna celebrated her triumph by opening Maxim's eyes and protecting him from mistakes. To complete the picture, she could only grab her unlucky daughter-in-law and place her in front of her. By the countless eyewitnesses up by the hair, what Natalya wanted most now was to be alone and not see anyone. She turned around thinking that Maxim hadn't heard her after all and followed her without seeing him. She exhaled in relief. Thank God she was smart enough not to touch it now, almost running. I ran out into the street to drive this. I was in complete silence in the car for about minutes. I thought about my clothes, evaluated them. Phone and dialed the number of lawyer Oleg Ivanovich. Hello. With a voice choked with tension, I said hello. Natalya Leonidovna decided to regret her husband withdrawing the divorce application. No, I haven't changed my mind. On the contrary, I want you to resume the divorce process, trying not to panic because of the appearance. She coughed several times. What her friends and neighbors will say. She will definitely consider you mercantile, petty, and prudent about the reason for the divorce. People are different. As you know, for each mouth you can't put a handkerchief. He said he is already recovered, asked the surprised lawyer. There was silence on the phone for a few seconds. Why does this happen in life? Now it is inconvenient for her to offend him. No, he did not recover. Calmly, Natalya replied calmly. In this case, the court can order alimony for the maintenance of a disabled spouse. I agree with everything just to finally get rid of this hater. Wedding, in a tone that does not tolerate objections, said Natalya. It is not clear where the words appeared before our eyes this time, probably from relief, because she understood. Stop thinking about others. It's time to think about yourself and not allow everyone Marim Alexandrovna to open her mouth and blame undeservedly, for which she was not at all to blame. A month passed. The first hearing in the divorce case was scheduled for Monday at a.m. Lyosha had already been discharged from the hospital by that time. Her mother-in-law fulfilled her promise and took her son to the village the day before her discharge. Together with her, she collected the necessary things for the first time. Despite her father's vile act, Kostya took them to the village in his car, warned them that he would stop by here as often as possible, asked his father not to worry about trifles and, most importantly, not to be offended by his mother at the hearing. Alexey came alone. Alexandrovna Natalya also entered the court with her lawyer. She tried not to look at Alexey, but it was difficult to do so. Her eyes kept searching for who had started this mess and now looked at her with such a prayer, as if asking him was so unhappy and they felt sorry for Bedny. But Natalya came today with TVM and intending to hear the case once and for all. With bated breath, Natalya immediately focused on Oleg Ivanovich. They made one great job. I didn't want to drag all the dirt, but the lawyer was adamant, forced her to bring a certificate where, in black and white, a disappointing diagnosis was made. Margarita Vladimirovna agreed to act as a witness and tell that Natalya should have an abortion, and she was also ready to tell that she became an involuntary witness when, near her office, Olga extorted money from Natalya for silence, and did not hide that Alexey had already paid her as confirmation. The lawyer had a recording from CCTV cameras, persuaded him to act as a witness. For Yura, at first the meeting was held in a standard manner, but when the witnesses began to speak, Marina Alexandrovna's cheeks could no longer blush. "You better look at yourself and look decent. And one time I ran to the hospital to see. My husband was sick for minutes, but I found time to run among the men, and they decided to make my son a scapegoat." Jumping out of the chair with foam, Marina Alexandrovna screamed. The lawyer leaned over to Natalya, warned her. In order not to react to the accusation against her, she took the necessary documents from her folder and handed them over to the judge. Natalya assumed that Alexey would deny the Supreme Court and deny, but unlike his mother, he behaved with dignity and did not shout, confirmed all the accusations against him. The only thing he asked the judge for was time, reconciliation, and when his lawyer hinted at the elements, he said that it was nothing for him. There was no need for Bonham. Apparently Alexey's lawyer resolved all the problems with his mother, so when he demanded that the defendant receive half the cost of the apartment, Alexey, despite his mother's indignation, categorically refused and said that the question he and his wife will decide for themselves. At best, he will agree only with the third part. The court leaves it to make a decision. The lawyer again began to whisper something in Alexey's ear, but he did not hear him. He looked at his sore hand and thought about his own. Sometimes he looked at Natalya and looked away at her mother, who was sitting sullenly like a mouse on her ass, sighed heavily and looked with displeasure at her hated daughter-in-law. As the lawyer warned, this time they did not divorce. The court appointed a month for the reconciliation of the parties. When Natalya heard the court's decision then, "I couldn't hide my disappointment and started crying." They divorced just a month later. During this time, Natalya moved all her things out of the apartment and paid her husband 1/3 of the rent for the apartment. Alexey transferred his share to her several times during this period. He tried to make peace and beg for forgiveness, but Natalya was inexorable. Alex had no choice but to agree. It's been a week since Natalya went to work for the first time. She may have been complex in the first few days. Some people looked in her direction, but then everyone lost interest in her and looked for the deputy chief doctor who had been in an accident and was in the hospital with several bruises and an open wound. Arm fracture. The working day was coming to an end. After reading a message from Masha with an offer to talk and drink coffee, Natalya was about to type the answer, but a knock on the door distracted her from the conversation. With her friend, literally a second later, Maxim looked at the office. "I can't go to the appointment. I'm dealing with a personal matter." There was no one in the hall. Without waiting for a response, he entered the office, closed the door behind him and sat down opposite him, leaned back in the chair, placed his hands on the table and continued as he was in the mood to say that Natalya was surprised. It is to say nothing for so long. Not a word from him, and then again it fell out of nowhere. He calmly resisted her surprised look. "I realize that until you are in the school of intelligence, a woman generally behaves rudely," defends his position. "I left the cafe almost immediately after you." He straightened his back, looked closely at her thoughtful expression. It was like he was trying to read her face first and then adapt to her mood. "And now why did he come?" "As you know, I suddenly forgave my husband and didn't get divorced. Do I know everything about you?" Seeing her perplexed look, Maxim even smiled. "And you know," the conversation took an interesting turn. "And the most important thing is that he appeared so suddenly in her life and also disappeared suddenly and caused absolutely no waves of negativity. I have a friend who works as a private detective. I had to contact him." "His mother-in-law?" "Of course not." I believed. But the worm of doubts crept in somewhere deep down. "I've already been married once. I don't want to make a mistake a second time," he explained to the especially gifted man, putting a smile on his face. "Are you planning to marry me?" Natalya joked and didn't even notice how she started laughing a little later while I was proposing to get used to getting to know each other, and then I'll think about it. We'll definitely get it in the office, but there's no need to rush, although we will not postpone the question of marriage for long. What do you think of this situation? Maxim stated confidently, covering his hand. Natalya did not oppose with the palm of her hand. We cannot know what awaits us tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and even more so. In any case, Max gave the impression of a person with whom it was interesting to communicate. The fact that he had her under surveillance, I didn't want to push him away. Time will tell. I've already burned myself with milk. Now I'm going to blow water for a long time, Natalya replied calmly, and started getting ready to go home. About minutes later, when she and Max were about to leave the office, Natalya's phone rang. Seeing her ex-Rose number, she called eyes and pressed the green tube. I'm listening to you. Marina Alexandrovna sat down on a chair, looked at Maxim and, just in case, put her finger to her lips. Thank you for everything. The reptile brought my son to sadness. Sir, why did Alexey contact you? She asked him not to rush, not to get married so soon. Yes. Did he really hear me? In the personal list, and spoke in a nasal voice. Now I'm in the hospital. Alexey had a second stroke. Who do you think is to blame? Urgent. Divorce. Why think about a sick husband when there are many other healthy men around? I thought you would do everything possible to take my son to the grave. Natalya's face turned white. No matter what happened, but she only wished her ex-husband a speedy recovery. Kostya was always interested in the state of his health, and I was happy when my son talked about his father's successes yesterday. Kostya said that Alexey picked up a spoon for the first time with a sore hand, and the joy of his grandparents did not know limits. Realizing that Natalya's connection was too upset, Maxim approached and whispered what happened without turning his head. Natalya again put her finger on her lips. Marina Alexandrovna, you called. She barely squeezed and didn't notice how tears rolled down her face. He doesn't answer anyone. My son isn't necessary, I thought, and you don't answer the phone. Of course, why do you need our problems? I thought my son was recovering, but because of the divorce he got upset again. I don't know now what will happen on the phone. Loud sobs were heard. Yes, what does this have to do with me? How much can you blame me for all the sins? The fault is that I should have taken care of my health, not under my son's fiancée's skirt. Alexey never complained about his health. He rarely drank and didn't smoke. Who knows, Olga gave some kind of Viagra to him and his mother-in-law? Now it is pointing all the arrows at her. Damn. The infection knew that you would be absent again and passes the beak. Short beeps were heard. Natalya looked at one point and in complete silence held the phone close to her ear until it rang again. Mom, Dad was back to the hospital. I heard my son's alarmed voice. I know that Grandma called as always accused me of all my sins, said Natalya in a barely audible voice. She glanced sideways at Maxim. He was standing near the door, holding the handle as if he was afraid someone would look in and interrupt the conversation. Going to the hospital without hearing anything in response, hesitantly asked me there. Grandma isn't going crazy. I think my mother-in-law will be happy to see me. There wasn't enough scandal in the hospital. It will be a shame. Manage somehow without me if I is in touch. Natalya looked at Maxim's thoughtful face. An obsessive question crossed her mind. Why does he always appear in at the most inopportune moment? I would not like his mere appearance to be associated with the approach of the next problems. I understand that your ex is having health problems again. I can help with something just with your appearance. You have already done your part. If, God forbid, you didn't continue, Lord, why? That's all she can do to shift the blame onto her shoulders. And the most interesting thing is that now she thought about her mother-in-law's words, and I really felt guilty. I don't know what to do, how to deal with one of us. We are strangers. People have nothing in common besides our son, and with the other I feel selfish. So let's take her hand to the hospital so that you don't meet your dear ex-mother-in-law. I will take you to my department. I will give you a robe right away. We will figure everything out in just an hour. Together with Maxim, we sat in his office and waited for news. I immediately contacted the attending doctor and Asked to keep him informed, they sat silently in the office drinking coffee. Natalya flinched at every incoming call and only calmed down when she saw it on the screen. Several acquaintances who didn't even know that Alexey was back in the hospital after talking to Masha Natalya again looked up and met Max's gaze. He was talking to someone on the landline, asking questions, getting answers. Alexey is now in intensive care. Nothing is clear yet. I'm going to go down there now and take a look at him with my own eyes once again. I'm going to talk to the doctor, and you wait for me here. A drop of cold sweat ran down my spine. The moment she looked at Maxim like a tongue drowning in a lifebuoy, as if she was tied to the NBU. He disappeared for about minutes, but as soon as he appeared, from his look it was clear that the jokes were over. He stopped a few steps from the door, as if remembering something, turned sharply and closed the door tightly. The prognosis is not very good. Most probably her ex-husband will remain disabled. Ischemic stroke. Marina Alexandrovna was driving her grandson's car, crying and constantly scolding Natalya. If her mother loved my son at least a little, nothing would have happened. She is a bastard. What a bastard she is. It's all because of her. She always didn't give a damn about him. Okay, I didn't go to the hospital, but at least I called. I asked where it's not her concern to move away and the grandmother lives for her own pleasure. That's enough. But to what extent can the mother have nothing to do with this? Put yourself in her place. You woman must understand that her father acted disgustingly. She's not even talking about me. Marina Alexandrovna. She was silent for a while, as if hoping to say something in defense of her hated daughter-in-law, but I didn't have time for that. That again, I would have to leave the house in the city, move to take care of my son, take care of the wildebeest, murmured Marina. Well, who will take care of him? To take care of my mother. They separated. I will come here naturally, but not for long. I need to work to help my mother pay the loan on the apartment. There is no one but you, the lover with whom he cheated on his mother of him. I would hardly place such an unbearable burden on his neck. I no longer wanted to remember Olga since he kicked her out of the house. I tried not to think about her. Now all thoughts were directed. Regarding Labasha, they only met a few times and spent time together, until Kostya insisted too much and Luba was quite happy about it. She shuddered as she didn't want to answer. Alexey didn't want to share the apartment. He was planning to go back to work after his illness, take out a small mortgage. Alexandrovna didn't even want to listen. She gave her son a choice. If he doesn't take the money for his share, so let him forget the way to his parents. Give this professional network a strong thought out loud, holding the bag in his hands, turning his head. I take all the expenses with myself. Marina was silent for a while, as if she was thinking about something, then shed tears again and added, "It's good that you're not in character." Mom took after Dad. No one else said a word, but everyone was thinking the same thing. Boomerang didn't take long to wait in practice. He rarely returns, as if offended. So ne'er change the direction of the wind, or he might collide with a foreign object, but apparently Leshin Boomerang has no obstacles. I arrived at my destination, automatically looking at my phone. Natalya didn't know how to behave. She should have called her son, or at least offered her mother-in-law help, but she didn't have the courage to dial their number and tell the son what was happening in my soul. On the way home they drove in complete silence without even asking permission. Max climbed onto the floor with her. "Thank you for accompanying me." I shrugged my shoulders. Maxim took an uncertain step towards the elevator, but then stopped abruptly. "I can't leaving you in this state. Don't even ask if you don't invite me to visit. I'll sit under the car window." On the one hand, Natalya now wanted to be alone, but on the other hand, it was good that at least someone was talking about her. After inserting the key into the keyhole, she literally made the decision. "Come in a few seconds. I'll buy you a coffee." Letting him pass first, she walked away with her eyebrows raised in surprise. Maxim looked closely at her face and entered the apartment while he was washing his hands in the bathroom. Natalya turned to the coffee maker. She only managed to insert the capsule when at that moment she heard the creaking of the door locked to her ex's health. My husband muttered dissatisfiedly and immediately went to the kitchen, sat down tiredly on a chair so as not to listen to his grandmother. made up a bunch of excuses and so as not to fight with her completely, looked at his son and felt his heart beating intermittently. I was in the hospital. I know that Alexey had an ischemic stroke. The conversation was interrupted by Max entering the kitchen. Seeing her son's face stretched out in surprise, Natalya could barely restrain herself from laughing. Maxim stretched out his hand. Max looked carefully to Kostya, trying to read the mood on his face. They now looked like two men gathered on the same territory and ready for a fight. Konstantin, son of Nat Leonidov, looked at his mother. Silence hung in the kitchen. Realizing that his mother was not going to make excuses for him, the bones on his bones relaxed. A tense smile appeared on my face. It seems like I'm at the wrong time, son. Don't follow your grandmother's example and don't talk nonsense. Maxim, my colleague, works as a doctor in the hospital where your father is. It's because of this colleague that your grandmother stayed angry with you without taking his eyes off. Maxim turned to his mother and grandmother. You are a serious woman. She has a boneless tongue. I don't understand why you allow her to offend her mother. Maxim. He could not remain silent, remembering the meeting in the cafe, clearly looking at his interlocutor Kostya. He felt his Adam's apple contract. It seems, Maxim interrupted him. Kostya turned to Natalya. Sorry that I came unannounced in some unexpected way, but don't worry, I'm leaving now. Tomorrow, I'll call Kostya and tell your grandmother not to call me again. I don't want to communicate with her. Let me take out my anger on others. She will leave me alone. I didn't want to blacklist her phone, but she leaves me no choice. It seems like she decided to give me a stroke too and placed me in bed next to my son while Natalya spoke to Kostya as if she were under a microscope carefully. Looked at Maxim as if he was trying to read the information from the expression on his face, drawing conclusions for himself. I will convey your request to her. It's just that Grandma still cannot accept the fact that you and Dad are not together. He looked at Maxim again, waved his hand at Natalya, and walked out the door. I thought you were at your mother's house. Are you staying the night? Or now there is no room in her apartment for not only my son but also my grandson? Asked the first thing that came to her mind. Grandmother, leaving the phone out of her hands, Marina immediately called the hospital and asked about Alexey's well-being, but she again. They replied that everything remains the same. My mother has the right to her privacy. Kostya muttered dissatisfiedly. What are you trying to say, that she has already brought a man to the apartment, not wanting to continue the conversation anymore? He went into the kitchen and turned on the kettle. The situation began to infuriate him to the point of grinding his teeth on the tongue of the spit, as he was no longer wasting his body's nerves. Discussions with my grandmother since my father fell ill. She changed beyond recognition. From being kind and friendly, she became a true Hera. Being in same territory as her was simply unbearable. This was to be expected. Marina Alexandrovna sank into a chair. If you have a bad word with me, do you understand me? I'm making the last Chinese warning. Bite your tongue. Marina in response shook her head and turned to the window to the point of tears. It's a shame that no one took her opinion into account, she muttered under her breath. She picked up the phone, opened her contacts, and deleted Natalya's number, and said confidently, let him live as he knows how. The sun won't rise. Your own happiness in the misfortune of others. I will no longer have a daughter-in-law to die for. I'm not going to ask for help, but I liked Maxim. I saw this Maxim. A man like a man. Nothing remarkable, 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 torso. Without arguing further with her grandson, Marina got up and left the kitchen. A year and a half passed. Mother, welcome the guests. Her son's impatient voice sounded. Natalya put the baking tray in the oven and ran into the hallway. Kostya announced yesterday that he would come to dinner with Luba. 7, but apparently decided to arrive early. Hello, Natalya Leonidovna. Handing her a bouquet of flowers, greeted Luba, and Kostya stuck it into her. With the other hand, the shopping bag dragged Luba to the bath to wash her hands. Natalya Leonidovna, I'll wash my hands now and help you. The girl answered as she walked, and then followed Bones. Natalya looked at the clock. At any minute Maxim should have it was known that her son would come to visit his girlfriend Ella. I immediately called him and also invited him to dinner. Since Max met his son, they began to meet more often. And about 6 months later, Max spent the night at Natalya's house. The first time after everything he went through in his first marriage. Talking about living together, Natalya sat on the vine, thinking that she could no longer trust any man. Mom, don't make a fuss. It's okay, Luba and I got married today. Look, when we saw a ring on our son's ring finger. Natalya staggered and almost sat where she was, and looked away at Luba, who was already pouring water into a glass. Natalya Leonidovna, here you drink. Seeing that her mother-in-law emptied the glass to the bottom, Lubasha frowned and looked at her husband disapprovingly. They could have warned her, she said almost inaudibly and disapprovingly. I looked at my son, or at least booked a table in a restaurant. My friends will say that the wedding has been postponed. You can imagine what will happen if Marina Alexandrovna finds out that her only grandson did not invite her to the wedding. As soon as Alexey was discharged from the hospital, his father-in-law and mother-in-law sold their farm, a house in the village, and invested their savings in cash. Natalya paid the rent for an apartment for Lyosha and bought 2 one-bedroom apartments on the outskirts of the city. After Alexey's second stroke, his facial muscles became paralyzed, his vision worsened, his speech skills were impaired. He was able to pronounce normally, literally a few words, and when they didn't understand him, he started freaking out. He waved his good hand and limped into the room, closed the door, and didn't want to see anyone. After the first blow, I was again partially immobilized on no more weddings. Once was enough for me. While the bride was getting ready behind my back, she did so many numbers that just remembering it is disgusting enough to make you laugh, said the Bones with a smile, hugging Lyabash. And why your doors are not closed, among whoever wants. Upon hearing Maxim's voice, Natalya turned around, head, and finding herself in his arms, she could only take her hand in greeting. Hello. You offended your mother by looking at the bride and groom's rings and asked, well, yes, they got married without permission, so my mother is crying that she didn't go to my marriage with Lubasha. Maxim looked questioningly at Natalya's upset face, as if he couldn't figure out why. There is such an ambiguous reaction to such wonderful news. We should be happy, but she cries. As long as we are alive, everything can be fixed. Well, anyway, let's try it. He winked at the Bones. Max took a blue box out of his pocket, handed it to Natalya. Lubasha gasped in surprise. Natalya whistled. Natalya opened her mouth. She simply looked at Max or at the box, which she did not dare to open, knowing full well that the turning point had come when she just had to make a decision ending. And the most interesting thing was that she clearly understood that despite all the caution, her hands were eager to open the box and try on Nazim's ring. You are asking me to marry you? She asked uncertainly, although the answer was obvious. Max fell to her knees and looked closely at her. Natasha's face continued. Marry me. Luba clapped her hands. Kostya hugged his wife by the shoulders and kissed her on the cheek. Natalya extended her finger. Maxim, to the stormy applause, put a ring on her. I agree, she said, almost inaudible. Hooray. Kostya shouted. They know no walk at their wedding, so at least at yours we will have a lot of fun as a wife in exactly months. Maxim and Natalya walked out of the secretariat door, well-dressed and happy. Only Kostya and Luba were the guests. Girlfriend Masha and parents on both sides. No one would have a big wedding as soon as young people arrived. Marina Alexandrovna came out in her car to meet them. Seeing the bouquet in her hands, Natalya's heart froze for a moment. This is a meeting you have been waiting for a long time, said Max with a smile, but I immediately warned mine wife I will not offend if you came to spoil the holiday. So take the bouquet and better leave. Opening in front of Natalya, the passenger door again faces Marina. Sorry, we do not invite you to the restaurant. Only the closest people go there. Don't be rude, young man. I'm just my ex-daughter-in-law and I'm leaving. My son asked me to congratulate Natalya. How are you? You see, he can't do it himself. I don't know where he found out, but I assume that through social media you young people like to do everything to show off. She handed Natalya flowers, turned around, got into the taxi, who was waiting for her, and left the moment she crossed out her ex-daughter-in-law's phone number from her contacts. Marina tried in general. She didn't think. She didn't care. She didn't care. Met her grandson. Didn't start a conversation with Natalya. Didn't start a conversation. What else was missing? She thought that there was no place for a traitor in her life. If her son hadn't asked to deliver flowers and ask for forgiveness for everything, they would never have. She no longer remembered the flowers. Of course she delivered them. But she didn't ask for forgiveness when she returned from the office. Marina asked to fight for the cleanliness of the train. The girl would like to live with the carpets near the front door of the plane. Still impressed. Without even looking for the girl, Marina took the outstretched piece of paper and a pen. And when she looked at her, I barely recognized Olga. "What are you doing here?" I opened my eyes. "Very surprised, and asked if I'm working part-time, and that's why you cheated on my grandson and got into my son's pants." Marina opened her hands in their own. "It's none of her business." "Honey, I don't have time to talk to you," he muttered dissatisfiedly, threw it on the floor, stepped on it and went home, leaving dirt behind. "I'll check in an hour if you don't wash it well. I'll complain to your boss. You'll lick all my entry with the tongue." Oel swore softly. "But the old Korga is furious with Nesta. He will take her away from her." "She won't take her away if she had." Knowing that she lived in this house, she would never have agreed to replace her friend during her illness. It's good that she hasn't met Kostya with her love yet, so it would be a shame next time. Katyuka washes the floors here alone and prefers to sit on bread and water, counting pennies until she receives her salary, but only to never meet these people again.